Okay.
Welcome. So grateful for Reverend Sarah Chancellor Watson, St. Charles Avenue Presbyterian Church, up the avenue from us, right? Of course, Reverend Elizabeth Lott at St. Charles Avenue Baptist Church, and Reverend Ed Cooper in our connection in the Louisiana Annual Conference, United Methodist Church. Welcome. My Wi-Fi is a little funky. I noticed this. So we are starting at roughly page 97. And we, colleagues, just a moment ago have talked about the real interesting pull that Jones works from sociologists Emerson and Smith, Michael Emerson and Christian Smith. And we have found this compelling, at least to start our conversation today, that Jones looks at the nature of free will individualism, relationalism, and anti-structuralism as three tools from the evangelical cultural toolkit by which to navigate, maybe interpret, and act in culture these days. As a self-professed evangelical, dear sisters and brother, there are some in our annual conference, Reverend Cooper, might not surprise you, who have questioned, I kid you not, they've said it this way, wait, you're an evangelical? I was actually asked that question by a colleague, and I said, what do you mean? I believe in the good news of Jesus. And so I just found it interesting, these restrictions. And so as I've come off my video here, as you see, I found it really helpful, y'all, 97, 98, that Jones unpacks this idea of individualism, a particular American phenomenon, I think, as an American Christian, or a Christian who happens to be American. Relationalism means that white evangelicals tend to see the root of all problems in poor relationships between individuals rather than in policy, okay? Last, not least, anti-structuralism denotes the deep suspicion, maybe this is libertarian as well, with which white evangelicals view institutional explanations for social problems. Now, I am just teasing this out here. Elizabeth, Sarah, Ed. What do you think when you read that? What else pops up to you in this tail end of the believing chapter? Thanks for hearing all that.
Yeah, I think I want to start with like a pastoral caveat of acknowledging how hard this work is, and that this section in particular, because the folks who've been reading will have started with a little bit of eschatology, and then this idea of sin and salvation through a personal relationship with Jesus. And as Ed was saying in our conversation, like when you have cut your teeth on this, for it to be challenged and maybe even brought out to say this way of teaching was linked to a way of supporting white supremacy, that's really painful, and it could be really scary too. So I at least want to acknowledge up front, this is a hard one. The second part of the reading is about monuments, which allows us to get some breathing room again between us and the subject matter. But this one's personal and it's hard.
Elizabeth, I'm grateful for that pastoral hermeneutic. You've just given me a bit of grace that has helped me recenter in light of the previous 45 minutes of conversation we've had. Thanks for that. Boy, I needed that. Sarah, Ed, what else pops to your mind? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think in my tradition, we don't put a whole lot of emphasis on like personal, salvation. We don't do altar calls or anything like that, but we still don't quite get this idea of corporate sin and structural sin. And I feel like the times that I have sort of been challenged, I have kind of gotten in trouble, for lack of a better phrase, is in some of the prayers of confession that I've used to say that, and some of them have been quite broad of just, we are complicit in the violence in our world and in the injustices in our world. And I've had people come up and be like, I don't condone violence. I don't do this. And it's like, well, I know you maybe don't, but we are all part of this system where that is the case. And I remember preaching on the story of Noah, and actually the very end of it, and God's covenant with the people, with Noah and his family, to no longer to resort to violence. And it being on the heels of yet another mass shooting. I wish I could remember which one, and that's really sad that I don't. But I remember it was not long after one, and talking about, the sin of this violence in our world, and it really being a tough one for me, and tough one for my congregation. And but yeah, I don't think that our idea of sin is big enough. And it still comes back to this, like, what's the things that I do? And also, if I'm responsible for these large structural things, then maybe I'm a bad person. Yeah. And I think that's where it really gets touchy and painful, is that it really triggers that shame in us. And so instead of hanging in there like we're all doing right now, hanging in there and trying to work through it to get to the healing and wholeness that Christ's grace and forgiveness gives us, we run away from it. And I mean, I struggle with that all the time.
I'll tell you, Sarah. Go ahead, Ed. Sorry.
I'm sorry, Jay. As I've shared with you, this has been rather, the whole reading of Jones's book has been a rather jarring experience for me, but it's been a good one. It's one of those that I needed at this point in of my life, and this is another where we are right here on this particular specific discussion. It was something that I needed. I needed the confrontation, because in my previous life, in my previous heritage, you just didn't talk about social justice. That was left up to other folks, and we knew that wasn't the real gospel anyway. And I'm reading about this anti-structuralism, and because we wanted the individual to be saved and come to know Jesus, and to get that ticket punched and make sure that when death comes, you would on your way to heaven. And I'm not being irreverent here, and I'm not being, but Jones is saying, hey, there's a whole lot more to salvation. There's a whole lot more to the gospel. There are structures out there that are in need of salvation, that are in need of the gospel, that are in need of redemption and deliverance. And one thing I love about being a United Methodist, we even have social principles, and we try to live that out, but we can still do a better job at that. So I'm just so appreciative of those, especially even those who are viewing this, for your willingness to do the hard work, to have the hard conversation. And because I'm sure I'm not the only one. And well, my brother and my sisters on this video, this work is doing a number on all of us. And I'm sure it's having its impact on you, but it's a good thing. And I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful for how Jones is confronting us in areas where at least this pastor needed to be confronted.
So an image has come to mind that is maybe more lighthearted, that might help us in unpacking this idea of individualism, especially like this really fierce American autonomy. So we've moved to a more suburban neighborhood, still in Orleans Parish, but out at the edge, where people have yards and driveways in a way that you don't typically, like mid-city and uptown. And we have a neighbor who's a big leaf blower guy. And so like leaf blower guys, to me, are the greatest example of this kind of individualism that you mow your lawn and you do your edges and you get your leaf blower out, you blow everything away, and now your yard looks really great. When all you've done is just take your garbage and send it to all of your neighbors. As though like the place where my property line ends, I can't see beyond it. My old garbage just doesn't exist anymore. And that to me is American individualism that just infiltrated the church of like, well, my yard looks good. You seem to have a lot of leaves and cut up grass in your yard. I don't know how it got there because my life doesn't impact yours and my choices don't impact yours and we're not connected. So I'm going to start calling that leaf blower theology.
I'm saying right now in our congregation, leaf blowers, repent. No, this is great, y'all. I know we'll wind it down, but again, Reverend Elizabeth Lott, St. Charles Avenue Baptist Church, Reverend Sarah Chancellor Watson, St. Charles Avenue Presbyterian Church, and Ed Cooper. Ed, I didn't say earlier, your congregations, forgive me, that you have that beautiful work of two congregations, Boynton, UMC, and Aurora, UMC on the West Bank. We are grateful here. One thought, and because Sarah, I think you mentioned it, and y'all are all on fire today. This is, I think most of our folks will realize, the day after the first presidential debate. So we've indicated that in our own clergy conversation, but we just, for time, the timeline's sake, this is fresh and remains so relevant. It is page 96, Sarah, as you mentioned. I think your wording was, we don't have a big enough understanding of sin. I think something you said it better, but boy, that struck me. And it's page 96. It's the last full paragraph. It's nothing short of astonishing that a religious tradition with this relentless emphasis on salvation and one so hyper attuned to personal sin can simultaneously maintain such blindness to social sins swirling about it, such as slavery and race-based segregation and bigotry, the Proud Boys included, dear sisters and brother. Whew. That's Joan, Joel. So we are onward again. Thanks for this, and I will stop recording right now.